welcome back to the Prosperous Empath. Kat here. Let me ask you a question. Do you struggle with identifying what you want because you're so tuned in to what you know other people want and what their preferences are? Do you struggle to not only identify your own boundaries, but then uphold them in the face of other people's requests of you? Or do you still identify as a people pleaser or have people pleasing tendencies that may be in recovery? I know I have struggled with all those questions over the years. And if you do too, then I think you are going to absolutely love today's conversation with my guest, Jill Ferguson. Jill is a serial entrepreneur, a best-selling author, and an international speaker. And she's joining me on the podcast today to talk about embracing your intuition and following a non-linear path in business, and perhaps even more importantly, in life. Jill started her first business at age 18, and she's been in and out of self-employment ever since, authoring dozens of books and exploring different passions from painting and photography to consulting and coaching. Something I really love about today's conversation is for so many of us who identify as empaths and people pleasers, we learned from a very young age to pursue a linear path, to graduate high school, go on to college, get married, have children, pursue a career, get the graduate degree. And for those of us who identify as empaths and highly sensitives, we are naturally intuitive and we have these divine creative gifts that will often be leveraged through following a non-linear path, through saying yes to opportunities that might take us down different directions and different paths as we really uncover the full expression of our gifts and who we are and how we can make the biggest contribution. Today on the podcast, Jill and I talk about how this notion that as small children, we really learned from a super young age that following the linear path was the right way or the correct way. And it really just became ingrained in our brains that entrepreneurship, life, religion, family, education, relationships, that it has to be a certain way when in reality, it just doesn't. None of it has to be linear. We talk about recognizing when you're making choices to fulfill other people's expectations versus fulfilling your own and learning how to trust yourself along the way. We dig into this notion that you have to run your business a certain way to be successful and building processes that feel authentic to you, learning how to market your business and talk about your business and attract clients to your business in a way that is aligned with who you are, your value system, and just feels good in your body is the way that's going to be the most successful for you. We dig into this idea that it's so important to live as a human being rather than a human doing, and how embracing what makes us come alive, what helps us feel connected with that sense of passion and openness and creativity is really that access point to following and pursuing our own nonlinear paths. It is such a beautiful and deep conversation, and Jill has such a unique perspective as someone who has followed a nonlinear path throughout her entire life. I think you are going to love today's conversation. Before we dive in, I want to share one thing that I am so excited about, and it feels really nonlinear because I don't see a lot of entrepreneurs doing this. We have recently opened up our unbounded private community for the public to join us. So if you're looking for a vibrant group of empathpreneurs who are passionate about supporting each other on our entrepreneurial journeys, come apply to join us. The link is in the show notes, and we look forward to seeing you there. With that, let's dive in. Hello and welcome to the Prosperous Empath podcast, designed especially for empaths and highly sensitive entrepreneurs just like you who are committed to achieving holistic success. I'm your host, Catherine Wood, Master Certified Coach, author, mastermind leader, and founder of Unbounded Potential, a boutique coaching firm for empathic entrepreneurs. I'm on a mission to bring empathy back into the world of business. Each episode will focus on achieving more by doing less through leveraging empath-friendly leadership practices, boundaries, rituals, and systems, all the while continuing to care deeply about ourselves, others, and the world around us. If you are committed to joyful living and running a conscious business, but amassing wealth while doing so, proving that you can have both in a society that tells you you can't, then you are in the right place. Join me here each week to find out how. Be sure to subscribe and leave a review so you won't miss an episode. Plus, you'll find all the show notes and helpful resources over at unbounded-potential.com. Hi, Jill. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me on your show.
I'm thrilled for our conversation today, and I'm thrilled for you to educate me on the topic that we're chatting about. But by way of getting us started, I'd love for you to share your pronouns and a little bit of your story and who you are.
I choose she, her pronouns. And a little bit of who I am is I've been kind of an entrepreneur since birth, I feel like. I've been writing for publications since age 12. I officially started my first business at age 18. But I remember during my preteen and teen years, selling magazines and gift wrap and all kinds of different things through the neighborhood. And it wasn't like for Girl Scouts or anything like that. It was just, I joined an organization that said, you could sell these things and make money. And I thought, oh, that's cool. And so I did that even from, the age of a small child. And I did write my first book when I was 5, but it was a disaster. So at that age, you really don't understand. I decided to illustrate it, and you don't understand the concept of water to pigment ratio. So I made a big soupy mess. But I feel like that drive was always in me.
And am I remembering correctly that you've both authored and ghostwritten many, many books?
Yeah, dozens.
I was curious. How many is dozens? I always love hearing.
Well, there's 18 books with my name on the front cover, and there's probably, I think, about 24 more without my name on the front cover.
Wow.
They have somebody else's name on the front cover.
That's extraordinary.
And my brother and I actually just started writing a mystery series, a cozy mystery series featuring a cattle dog as one of the main sleuths. And the first book is called Paws and Puzzles, and it's a whiskey mystery dog series is the name of the series because the dog's name is Whiskey. And we're writing those under the pseudonym Faith Walker. So
sounds like you've been a writer your whole life.
Yeah, I have. Writer and an entrepreneur.
Yeah. How have those paths interwoven, writing and entrepreneurship? Have they always been one and the same?
No. So I had full-time day jobs during my life. I think just like almost everybody who's entrepreneurial that I meet, occasionally we feel like we have to give in to, parent societal expectations of, you need to get yourself a job instead of playing with whatever it is you're doing. And so a lot of my entrepreneurial endeavors through my 20s and 30s were businesses I owned on the side or became side hustles where I was working for ad agencies or digital marketing companies or even companies themselves who needed product naming and copy for packaging and things like that. So it wasn't always writing books. And I was always teaching writing classes on the side and doing book coaching and writing coaching of clients on the side. But I go in and out of full-time self-employment. In this stage right now, I have been full-time self-employed since 2012. 2012. And I have not taken even a part-time job with anyone else since then. So I feel like I'm staying on that path now.
Well, I appreciate that. And I also appreciate just the sense of permission I hear in your entrepreneurial journey to allow yourself uh, to embrace a side hustle or full-time self-employment or a day job, and how there doesn't have to be that significance. I work with a lot of entrepreneurs, and I find that we often put so much pressure on ourselves to, oh, I'm going to become an entrepreneur, as if there's one way entrepreneurship has to look, and there's one way the journey to get there has to go, because truly there's limitless ones. And it sounds like that's certainly been your journey.
Yeah, I think if you don't stay open and you assume this like linear path to entrepreneurship or even to non-entrepreneurship, right? But to entrepreneurship is what we're talking about. Then you miss the opportunities that are in your life. And I'm one of those people that always stays open to the connections that I make, to the possibilities. Everybody that I meet, I look at them as a way that a possible collaborator. And hey, this is a new person, and what cool thing could we do together? And so I take that kind of approach to life. And so that following that way tells me that I'm never going to be able to figure out exactly what I'm doing 100% of the time, because I don't know yet. And I'm not closed off to what the future holds, which could be something really, really cool and interesting, and something that, feeds my soul more than even everything that I've done already, which has already been, completely life affirming and in a lot of cases, fabulous, right?
I wish that our listeners could see your face as you talk about this, because your eyes are totally glittering as you talk about this experience of opening yourself up to the countless possibilities of, what a new person you meet could unfold or create. And I think for so many entrepreneurs, that in and of itself speaks to a mindset shift that we have to make. It's like this idea that we go into an opportunity or a client engagement or a potential client engagement really clear on what we want, and we can get so fixated and attached and limited in our thinking around what's possible that we really kind of cloud ourselves from the full expansiveness of what could result and what could happen. And I really appreciate in your speaking about it just how creative and exciting and playful it can be when we have no agenda.
Yeah, it is. And you summarized that so well. I'm so grateful for that. It is. And going into things with that kind of mindset and just saying, okay, universe, I'm open to whatever right now, ends up presenting a whole bunch of stuff to us that we're not expecting, and that we, have the chance to be delighted and create and co-creators of everything around us.
I love that. So that's a perfect segue to what we're talking about today. And I want to give some backstory for our audience, because the reason we are connecting today is because a mutual friend of ours thought you'd be a great guest for the podcast. And when you reached out to me, you were talking about intuition and how intuition is a topic that's really important for you and meaningful, and you'd love to come up on the podcast and talk about it. And I was like, okay, well, love that. That's such a important topic for me. And, what's a different spin we could bring on that? Because I've actually had a guest talk about intuition. And so what you brought to me was this idea of a linear business path, and how specifically highly sensitives and empaths thrive from following a non-linear business path. So I am dying to dig into this topic, and I'm really curious with how intuition and a non-linear business path are connected.
Yeah. Okay. So, and can I, though that is the focus of what we're talking about, can I also add that it's not just for business? We're put on linear paths, I think, from the time we're small children. And we can be on nonlinear paths in all parts of our life.
Amen
right?
to
Which,
that.
yeah, which relationships, religion is another example, I think, not just education, careers, celebrations, right? We're even taught how to, like, this is the kind of wedding you should desire from a small child till, you become an adult. There's things that are ingrained in us, and sometimes it's subconscious and we don't even know. So linear path is like straight line, right? Point A, point B, point C, point D. We do this from the time we're kids. We're told we're going to go to school. And in school, you're probably going to be put eventually on a college track so that you can go to university, because everybody needs a college or university degree in order to achieve whatever the next step is in life, which means usually a job, right? That this is the normal kind of, I hate to use the word normal, but the kind of career progression that most humans are put on, at least most Western society humans, from the time they're little. And we may think we have other things, other skills. We may, especially HSPs and empaths, may feel a little like we don't always fit in the world because we're being accused of being too sensitive, or we may hear animals talk to us or something else, and realize very quickly that if we admit that to people, they're going to think we're a little nuts. And so we kind of squash that down and, go on our little merry way and do the things we're supposed to do, play the sports that we're supposed to play, get the grades we're supposed to get, so that we can go on eventually and get good jobs. And so that's kind of how linear stuff plays out in life. A nonlinear path would be to really ask yourself from the time you're small, what is it that I want to do? What's my passion? What feels good to me? And it's okay to explore this over here for a while and this over here for a while, and maybe take classes in dance or pottery or whatever is your thing for the moment. And if you end up not liking that, or if it's not quite like you thought it was going to be, then it's okay to go do something new. And creating our own career paths doing that same kind of thing, where you don't have to decide that, okay, I'm going to get an engineering degree and I'm going to become an engineer and I'm going to do this and I'm going to work for these companies, or I'm going to try to launch my own app or my own startup or whatever, and put all this pressure on yourself, when you may start doing that and you're developing skills in certain areas, and all of a sudden this other thing, a side door over here, looks like, oh, that looks like that would be interesting to go through. And instead of feeling guilty, because we do that to ourselves a lot when we think that what we're working on, we've worked so hard on, what happens if I give up on it, or I decide to do something else? And then we kind of feel like we're failing a little, even if we're really not. And it's like, well, let's go through the side door and see where the side thing takes us. And that's kind of what a nonlinear path would look like. It's following your heart and saying yes very loudly to opportunities that present themselves. And I'll give you just a quick example. So I started my college career studying musical theater, voice and theater. By the time my freshman year of college, the second semester happened, and I was taking makeup for the stage classes, my parents, God bless them, were like, why are we spending $300 on stage makeup for this class? And, this is just, what are you going to do with this when you get out? But wouldn't it be better if you studied business or marketing or something more practical, right? So sophomore year, I studied business for a while. Then I studied business and communications. And that's what I ended up with my undergraduate degrees in. And from there, I got a full-time job, but I was still writing freelance and doing other things. And then eventually I got a graduate degree and I became a professor. And I still had all these side hustles that I was doing because I gave myself permission to do all of that. But I still felt like I was fulfilling other people's expectations, which was you had a steady job with a paycheck, and all that kind of stuff that goes around that. And it wasn't until I was working full-time for an organization that it was a really toxic environment. And I was still doing the side hustles, but the main job was taking up all my time, all my energy. I was on 132 airplanes in 10 and a half months. So I had no life outside of work. That I decided that I would take a Thanksgiving weekend and go up to a spa in Calistoga, California. And I'm floating in a mineral pool. And I'm like, I should quit. And then all of a sudden, my heart was like, boom, 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 boom. It was like, oh, yeah, I should quit, like right now. and because I'm like super, super responsible, like I'm sure most of your listeners are, I spent the next 72 hours doing the next 6 weeks of my work. So I didn't screw over my colleagues.
Mm-hmm.
But that was Thursday or Wednesday night. I decided I was quitting. I think it was Thursday. By Sunday, I handed in a written letter of recommendation to the CEO and the board, and said, I'm done. Like, I'm not coming back. And here's how I've handed off these projects. This is where we are, did a status update and everything. And I all of a sudden felt this incredible weight lift and this freedom, right, that I wasn't expecting to feel. And that was Sunday. Monday is when a university contacted me and asked me if I'd do a big consulting gig for them as a contractor. And it happened to be in Hawaii, so that was nice. I got to go to Hawaii for work every so often. But it was like amazing that, okay, I shut this door, and I really needed to shut this door to protect myself and to heal, because there was a lot of trauma from that. And it's like, but this other thing that I had no idea was going to open up the next day.
Wow.
And I could work from home and occasionally fly to Hawaii to do stuff that I needed to do. And, and it was a beautiful relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we listen to ourselves and we choose to take the nonlinear path, our lives just evolve in ways that we don't expect. And they become so beautiful and so full of connections and all kinds of creativity. Even if you're a person who thinks I'm not a creative person, because I've heard people say that to me, oh, I'm not creative at all. Like, I'm an accountant, I'm not creative. And it's like, no, we were, especially women, but all of us were born with a divine creativity within us. And all you have to do is say, okay, I'm willing to explore that and embrace that. And we follow our nonlinear paths by passion driven.
What a beautiful story of how it can look. I mean, I've just been appreciating all of your hand gestures and your facial expressions as you're sharing this story, because I think when we follow our own intuition, it's very embodied, right? Like, you had a very embodied response when you had this kind of gut instinct that you had to leave your job. I think for many empaths and highly sensitives, we don't always attune to our body's wisdom. We have to learn to. And I guess I'm curious if you've always had that connection with your own inner knowing, your own kind of inner gut response, or was that learned?
The short answer is yes, I've always been connected, but the part that's been learned is the part where you have to learn to trust yourself, because I'm very empathic, very sensitive. I hear a lot of things about myself, but I also hear things about other people. And because, we're all empathic and we act like a bunch of sponges, sometimes it's hard to know what's mine and what's not mine. And also, I grew up in a very conservative Christian home, in an evangelical home. And so there's a lot of emphasis on what's from God and what's not from God. And so there's an internalization of, wait a minute, I think I know this, and is that good or not good? And so those were the pieces that I kind of had to let go of, and grow to know that I trust myself with this. even if I don't understand why, I trust myself. And I can give you a little example, if that's okay. Okay, so this goes back to what you and I were talking about before the show began. You asked me if I had any kids. And I knew from the time I was a small child that I was never going to have my own kids. I don't know how I knew that.
Wow.
And I eventually, as a preteen or teenager, told my parents, like, I'm not having kids. Oh, you'll get over it. You just think that now. And it's like, no, I don't think you're understanding. Like, I'm not having any kids of my own. And I didn't know what that meant. I just knew that that was the kind of the fact, right? The fact that was in me. Well, it turns out that I have O negative blood. And if you have O negative blood and you partner with somebody with a positive rhesus and you become pregnant, odds are very strong. In fact, they get the doctors now give you drugs to reverse the rhesus of the baby. Because if I partner with a positive rhesus person and conceive a child, my body attacks it as an allergen and kills it. The odds of that happening are really strong. That's what happened to me twice. So I had 2 miscarriages. I had no idea why I was having a miscarriage. It wasn't like we were doing like serious family planning or anything. I just, got pregnant. Within the first few weeks, my body was like, nope, we're not doing this. And we're done. And so it kind of came in 2011. It ended up that I had a big fibroid tumor and I needed a hysterectomy. And when I went into the surgery to do the hysterectomy, I said to the doctor, can you tell me, I know I have O blood type because, I'm old enough that back in the day in high school, we actually tested our blood type in biology class, but we couldn't do the rhesus. I said, so could you tell me what I have? And she said, oh, you have O positive. I'm sure you do, because we'd know if you had O negative. And I said, oh, okay. And she said, but I'll have them check. So she came back and, it's like 40 minutes before the surgery is about to start. And her face is ashen. And she looks at me and she said, you have O negative blood. How did we not know this? And I said, I don't know. And she's like, well, did you have miscarriages? And I said, yeah, I had 2 of them. And she's like, yeah, that's why. And then she explained to me the whole kind of like the allergen thing. And she said, that's why you couldn't maintain a pregnancy. And I said, oh, okay. Mm-hmm. And to me, it was just like, oh, my body knew that, my first husband was going to be like this. And then, not that it knew I was having a first husband, but it knew that I was not going to bear a child. But the really cool thing about this whole thing is that because I'm O negative, I'm a universal blood donor. Mm-hmm. And my blood, there's 15% of the population that is CMV negative, which is a virus that most adults have. Like I said, 85% of the adults have it in their system. I don't. So I'm O negative and CMV negative. And because of that, my blood can be given to preemies and infants. And it's the only kind of blood that can. And a few months ago, I give blood every 8 to 10 weeks because of that. And a few months ago when I was at the Red Cross donating blood, the phlebotomist that was going to take my blood, she was like, oh my gosh, how many babies have you saved? And it gutted me because I couldn't believe that I had never thought of it that way. And I ended up writing a very personal essay that I haven't published anywhere or shared with anybody, but it's about the fact that what flows through me, the blood that courses through me, can save children, even if my body couldn't save its own children.
I have goosebumps. Thank you so much for sharing that story. Oh. I am so touched by your grace and power and I mean, I think it's so impactful, like that you knew, right? That you
Yeah.
knew that you weren't going to carry children of your own, and that didn't mean you wouldn't save so many other babies' lives and support your own children by way of marriage.
Yeah. Yeah. I do have 3 adult stepchildren and I love them dearly.
Mm.
But yeah, I mean, this is part of the whole nonlinear path, right? That we go on when we embrace being empaths, when we embrace being HSPs, and we're willing to be open.
Hitting pause on this episode for just a moment to tell you about my absolutely favorite way for you to experience a taste of our work with ambitious empathpreneurs in our Emerge and Unbounded masterminds, 2 of the only communities we know of that are exclusively for early and established empath entrepreneurs. Each month, we host an intimate, non-networking power hour within our community for you to have a behind-the-scenes experience of what it's actually like to be supported in our community of empathpreneurs. Join us for the next event on Monday, April 15th at 12 p.m. Eastern Time by jumping on over to the show notes for this episode and grabbing your spot at unbounded-potential.com/podcast. I guess I want to explore this idea of being open because you were talking a little while ago about this idea that as empaths and HSPs, like if we want to follow this nonlinear path, we have to follow what we want. And this is a question I support clients in answering every day, all day. And it is a very confronting question. And I have found that it's a muscle. Like it requires a muscle to learn how to lean into that question, to giving ourselves permission to embrace the nudges and the wisdom that we gain. And I also think that it can start in childhood with more ease, or it can be learned in adulthood with a bit more resistance. And something I appreciate about my own journey, and I think this will resonate for many of our listeners, is that, as an HSP and an empath, like I was a people pleaser through and through.
Oh, yeah.
My entire childhood, the textbook good girl who wanted to do everything right and get things perfect. And, when we're so focused on doing things the right way and getting it perfect, we're fulfilling other people's expectations and desires. We're trying to make other people happy and pleased with us. We're finding our own sense of self and self-worth through fulfilling other people's desires and preferences versus connecting with our own truths, connecting with our own authentic wants and desires. So while it sounds really easy, like, oh, just follow the nonlinear path, like listen to what you want, that's been a decade process in the making for me to really give myself full permission, full embodied spiritual, mental, emotional permission to, gosh, I'm tearing up as I say it, but to answer honestly that question and then do follow through with what comes to me.
Yeah, I agree. I have, so a few weeks ago, one of my clients was in a documentary that Tony Robbins did, and was on kind of live on a Tony Robbins event. And so I went to support my client, did the online version of it. And Tony had a guy do a short little workshop towards the end of the event. And one of the things he said, we talk about, like, where do you want to be in 5 years from now? And we ask people where they are now. And most people can't really genuinely answer where they are now. And they certainly aren't even sure where they want to be in 5 years. He said, so what he found was he asked them the question of, if you could describe what the best year ever of your life would look like, what would that look like? And he said, you have 30 seconds, make a list. And so I made my little list because I figured I'd go along with it, right? And to me, it was like almost mind blowing, because one of the things that was on my list was that I would be more flexible and stronger in my body. And he said, so look at the things on your list and figure out how you can do one of the things on your list right now. And my first thought was, well, I could go to yoga more often than I am now and to be more flexible and stronger. And the first thing that comes up in our heads, right, often is all the excuses and the reasons why you can't do this. And for me, it was like, well, if I carve, I should say I live in a town where there is free yoga on the bluff overlooking the beach 7 days a week for an hour a day. And from April to November, it's twice a day.
Wow. And California, right?
California. And so I was like, well, I should start going to bluff yoga, right? To yoga on the bluff. But then in my head, I'm thinking, well, it's from 11 to 12 every day, 11 a.m. to 12 noon. And I thought, okay, it's going to take me a half an hour to walk there and a half an hour to walk back home, right? So that's 2 hours out of my day. And my head's going, well, you can't leave the office for 2 hours in the middle of the day, right? Because you're going to not be there for your clients and you're going to miss calls and and then I was like, holy crap, I work for myself, for crying out loud. I can set my own hours. I can answer email whenever, right? We get up in our household between 4 and 5 a.m. anyway, because my dogs want to get up and eat. And it's like, I could work earlier, I could work later. It doesn't really matter, right? And we do this to ourselves. We talk ourselves out of things that we think would be our best lives, because it's just like, well, what's everybody going to think, right? Or what are they going to say? And it's like, no. So I now on my schedule, 2 days a week, 2 hours is blocked out of my calendar. And the other days I do yoga at home. But, and so that's like my step to living my best life, right? And I think that's what people need to do, right? Is they need to realize, no, that's a linear path to me thinking I have to be in my office from X hour to X hour, right? We're self-employed, we're entrepreneurial. We can set our own hours. We can answer our email on our phone whenever we want. That's part of the beauty and the flexibility of working for yourself. Mm-hmm. It's like, if you can't control your own time, who can control it?
I love that you shared that story, because it makes me think of one of my own. And it's great, the example about envision the best year of your life, because we're not focused on what do we want to produce, what business program do we want to launch, what's the specific business plan that we need to write out. It's like, what does the best year of your life look like? It's so holistic. It's so much more all-encompassing, which, let's be honest, that's why we go into entrepreneurship in the first place, for the time freedom to live life on our own terms, by our own design. And then it's often the first thing that goes out the window when we feel like we can't get off, we can't walk away from our desk because there's so much to do and so many clients to generate it. And I want to share my own version of this story, because back in, I would say it was like in 2019, I was in this mastermind, and I made a great connection with a friend who had this gift in seeing possibility for folks, which for me, I think that is a magical muscle. It's to help people, see more possibility than they can hold for themselves. And from that relationship stemmed this future visioning exercise, which I adapted for myself. And I often share with clients who are really wanting to expand their own possibility. And the exercise that I have them do is to envision an ideal day from start to finish in as much sensory detail as they can, from the moment they wake up to the moment they go to bed. And then after that, that's the first part of the exercise. And then after the second is to create a monetary budget for themselves on what it would take to live that lifestyle. How would they spend their money? How much money would they need to generate? How much would they save? Where would they spend money in each of these buckets to really kind of help them visualize it both in concept and in practical. And then from there to create a monetary goal for how much income they want to do. So I adapted this exercise based on something that my mastermind friend wanted me to do. And 2019 was the first year that I declared I wanted to generate 250,000 in my business. I was like my fifth year in business. I started out slow and steady, and that next year was the very first year I generated that figure in my business.
Yay, good for you.
And for me, it has everything to do with what we're talking about here. Mm-hmm. It was to give myself permission to really embrace that, not only the nonlinear path, but also the nonlinear lifestyle.
Yeah.
The business schedule by my own design, working when I want to work, mm-hmm. not working when I want to work. And it really is, I think it comes down to this concept. You've said it a couple times, but it's permission, giving ourselves permission to embrace our way.
And that extends to the way that we get clients, right? Or customers, if you're in a business that gets customers. Because I find that there's so many people out there, and we're inundated every day on LinkedIn by them of like, I can create you this funnel, or I'm the marketer that you need. And they're all basically saying the same thing. And it's like, you know nothing about my business and me, right? So that may not be the best fit for me. And I have friends that have multiple times like created sales funnels and done all these things that are like textbook, this is the way you do this, right? Or run these ads on Facebook or Amazon or wherever. And they've had like 0 results each time. And I just look at them and think, it's because that's not deep in you. Like you're just doing what you think everybody else thinks is the right thing, instead of doing what internally you feel is the best thing for you.
Yeah.
And your business, because nobody knows your business better than you do.
That's such a beautiful reminder, because I think as empaths and HSPs, we are naturally intuitive. It's a superpower we possess, and it can be a major superpower in business when we choose to trust it. And when we kind of give up this notion that we need to do online business a certain way, as if there is a right way, when in reality, our own intuitive way is going to be the most effective and successful and joy producing way for us.
Yeah.
I want to bring it to your tattoo, because before we hit record, we were talking about being authentic, and you were sharing about your tattoo. And I feel like there's just a real connection here around this overlap. And I'd love for you to share what your tattoo is, but the overlap between intuition and authenticity.
Yeah. So in November of last year, on the inside of my right wrist, and I'm right-handed, I had an oversized bee that's black and yellow.
Looks like a bumblebee, is it?
It is. Yeah. Well, kind of. Yeah.
Or a hornet.
So I have a bumblebee on my wrist. Had it tattooed there because I wanted a reminder every single day, multiple times a day, to remind me to be a human being instead of human doing, and to remind me to be authentic, be passionate, be open, be inspired, and to, sometimes take inspired creative action, just like a bee, but being very purposeful with the way I live my life and the things that I do, the things that I choose, the people that I come into contact with, right? And also that it takes a hive really to do the bigger picture things. And so all of those people that I'm open to, that I connect with, that we are all working together for the greater good of society. And that's what bees do.
I love that. I really love that. And in my hometown, we have a lot of bee farmers, and it's such a reminder for me about how we just the power of community.
I respect bee farmers because one of the good things about like Groupon and Living Social is you get to try things and see if you like them, kind of inexpensively. And so I give myself permission to go do things, right? One thing I did was I took a beekeeping course.
Amazing.
And I learned very quickly the bees are super high maintenance and that I didn't really enjoy the beekeeping course. So I was like, okay, we're not having backyard hives because I thought maybe I would want to. But these are the kind of things I'm talking about where you can explore what you think you might want your life to look like just to see if you like it. Right. I took a glass blowing class to do the same thing. And I did one lesson in a small airplane to see if I wanted to learn to fly airplanes, and learned that I didn't really like any of those things.
And you gave yourself permission to try and to dabble and to play and to discover
Absolutely
what fills you up.
Yes. Yes.
And coming back to the nonlinear path, like I think that is such a key, right? It's like giving ourselves permission to play and to be unattached to where what sticks and what doesn't. And it's not a failure, right? It's like
unattached to the outcomes, right?
Yeah. Totally. Wow. Well, this has been so inspiring. I had no idea where we were going to take our conversation today. Is there anything that we haven't talked about as pertaining to the nonlinear path that you want to make sure we touch upon?
I would just say that the nonlinear path is always the chance to follow love. It's the chance to be spontaneous. It's the chance to listen and hear to your inner knowing. And it's also the chance that when you allow yourself to experience different things, that you end up acquiring skills that you don't expect. And you never know when those kinds of skills are going to be useful in a totally different situation going forward. And I think that if we follow our lives that way, where we follow what we feel like is best for us, that we end up with all of the skills that we need to navigate anything. Right? Because we're just following our intuition, and our intuition will never lead us wrongly. It's always going to lead us correctly. But the hardest part of all of that, right, is learning to listen just solely to us and block out the rest of the noise around us.
Yeah. And not attaching significance to how things go. I think so often when we're following the intuitive path, we can just get so myopically focused in what we produced or didn't produce, or how it went or how it didn't go, when in reality, the clarity on the journey is the value, right? Like being able to redirect ourselves while we're already in motion is the lesson.
Yeah, absolutely.
I majored in economics and Latin American studies in college, and I never was interested in economics. And I still to this day kind of question, why did I major in economics? And I never would have met my husband had I not majored in economics, because economics is what got me my first job after the Peace Corps, which introduced me to my husband on my very first week of work.
Nice.
And so, I think that, again, it's not the nonlinear business path. It is the nonlinear life path. And
did you feel like your intuition was telling you to study econ?
I did. I felt like I was meant to study economics.
That's interesting. And everybody knows now that you're expecting a baby. How long have you and your husband been together?
We have been together a decade this year, and we were friends for 4 years before we started dating. We were just joking about this because he just left the federal government after 15 years of service, and we met in our very first week of my going to work at the Bureau of Labor Statistics.
Nice. That's exciting.
Yeah.
I'm with you. This is actually this year's my 10th wedding anniversary year to my husband.
Well, we're just in our first and a little year of marriage.
Okay.
So you got 9 years of marriage on us, but
yeah,
but that's beautiful.
We weren't together that long before we got married. So yeah.
Well, that sounds like you following the intuitive path for sure.
Yeah.
Well, I've so appreciated our conversation. I always love ending every chat with just an invitation to share. What do you say has made the difference for you in becoming a prosperous empath on your nonlinear path?
I think it's really listening to my intuition most, because it's taken me on some wild rides with things I never saw coming. And taken me to clients and have relationship with clients that have morphed into various kinds of things. And so, yeah.
Is there a practice or a ritual that you employ that kind of most attunes you to your intuition?
Every morning I do meditate, and I'm not one of these people. I think meditation's another one of those things where people create, I don't know if it's goals, but they definitely create expectations for themselves. Like I have to sit for X number of minutes, and I have to do this and I have to do that. Right. And I'm not one of those people that do that, because I found that doesn't work for me. What works for me is to say, okay, I'm going to meditate now. And sometimes I'll listen to a binaural beats app that is a theta brainwave meditation or something. And sometimes I sit in the sunshine on my back porch and just bask in the sunshine and stay in a meditative state for however long it feels good for me. Other times I'm meditating while I'm walking my dogs in the morning. So I do what works best for me as a practice on that particular day. And then doing that always confirms, I would say, my openness for everything that happens the rest of the day.
Yeah, I love that. And I really appreciate the reminder that even meditation is a place where we can so often fall into this perceived right way of doing it.
Yeah.
And how much more satisfying and impactful attuning to the nonlinear way is.
Yeah.
For you, for me too, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Jill, I appreciate you coming on today and loved our conversation. And I really appreciate your vulnerability. It was really lovely having you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for listening today to this episode of the Prosperous Empath Podcast with me, Catherine Wood. Make sure you subscribe and leave a review so you don't miss an episode, and so more empaths just like you and me can find the show. As a thank you, each month, one lucky reviewer will receive a 60-minute coaching session with a member of our Unbounded Potential team. You can find all the show notes and bonus resources over at unbounded-potential.com. Thank you so much for listening and locking arms with me to bring empathy and prosperity back into the world of business.